Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Canvas. I'm pleased to be joined by Dan, Graham, Rui, and Ola, who will be presenting on why industry and education collaboration is big business. So in a moment, I'll pass over to Dan and Ola, who'll be able to chair today's session. But before I do, I'd just like to remind everyone that today's session is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be sent to you a week from today. Also in today's session, there'll be a Q&A section at the end for around 10 to 15 minutes. So we encourage you all to send in your questions throughout the webinar, and we hope to answer these all at the end. For any unanswered questions, don't worry, Canvas has kindly agreed to reach out to you following the webinar with their answers. So without further ado, I'll now pass over to Dan, who'll be able to facilitate the workshop.
Thank you, Paul. And again, first and foremost, thank you to everyone who has taken the time to attend the webinar today. As part of my role at Instructure or Canvas, I'm frequently invited to attend and occasionally host sessions such as these. But given the topic that we're discussing, as well as the individuals that I obviously have the pleasure of talking with, I have to say that I'm very fortunate to be chairing this discussion today. So as a means of introduction, my name is Daniel Hill. So I'm the Regional Director for UK and Ireland at Instructure. So that means that I spend most of my time talking and working with various educational institutions around the UK and Ireland, talking to them about the ways in which they're hoping to drive innovation into their teaching practices. Alongside me from Instructure, I also have my colleague Ola Nwaiwu, marketing coordinator for Instructure. She does a wonderful job of engaging with a lot of those institutions that I speak with. One of the reasons why I'm here talking to you all today, and also is going to be doing a great job of collating kind of questions and comments and putting those to me and the rest of the wonderful panel of guests that I have with me. Now, speaking of those guests, I'd love to take the opportunity to just let each one of those people introduce themselves. And I'll start off with the current Director of Digital Education at Cranfield School of Management, Mr. Graham Bell, who can talk a little bit about his role and experience and go from there. Graham.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here today. So looking forward to really trying to give you some insight and also answer any questions that you've got. As Dan says, current role is the Director of Digital Education at Cranfield School of Management. We're a university that deals with postgrad. I'm sure many of you know that. And my role is specifically focused on the digital education within the business school. My background, really, I'm a technologist by background. I've spent most of my working career working with various different technologies, from websites, databases, all the way through to education technology. I'm an Apple Distinguished Educator. I've worked with Apple on a number of occasions over the last, since 2013, I think I was inducted into their program. But more recently, and since the pandemic, my role has been to help the school move through what's been obviously a tricky time for everybody, and guide faculty and our colleagues through the difficult waters of delivering in a very different fashion to what people have been used to. So looking forward, we've got a digital education strategy that we're looking to take forward into the future, which really touches on some of the things I think that Dan wants us to talk about today. So I won't say too much more about that now, but we'll certainly cover some of those points as we go forward. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Graham. That's fantastic. And we also have with us today Mr. Rui Coutinho, who is the Executive Director of Innovation and Development at Porto Business School. Welcome, Rui. Talk to us a little bit about your roles, your responsibilities as well.
Hi, Daniel. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Yes, I'm currently Executive Director of Innovation and Development at Porto Business School. Before I speak a little bit about what I've been doing, let me just briefly mention how fit this webinar is for the reality of Porto Business School, because we are the product of a collaboration between university and industry. So Porto Business School is the business school of the University of Porto, but we are set up as a non-profit organization, autonomous organization, that is owned by 40 of the biggest companies in Portugal and the University of Porto. And we deal mainly with executive education. So post-grad, post-experience, very focused on the last 33 years on what is now currently known as lifelong learning. my focus at Porto Business School is on innovation and development. So this means that I'm in charge of the development of our programs, meaning working with the academic directors on sophisticating the value propositions, the content, formats, etc., etc. But on the innovation side, I also try to bring some new insights and understand what's new, what's next, and bring that to our programs. But in the last 2.5 years, mainly, we've been addressing our own transformation at Porto Business School. So from the product, from the value propositions, from the customer expectations, and sorry to say customer expectations, but we are in a business, and so we work for customers. Our students are our customers, and even our business model. So we have been reflecting a lot on ourselves and how we can transform our business. By career, I'm not an academic. I've started my career working on innovation in the private sector. Then I spent a few years on the public sector, attracting foreign direct investments to my country, especially tech companies, high knowledge, high innovation companies. And from that, I started building a career in the knowledge sector. I'm a professor of innovation and entrepreneurship, and that's what I feel I am, even though acting as executive director at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rui. And as you can see, we're very fortunate to have both Graham and Rui joining us today to talk through these various topics. So over the course of this sort of 60-minute session, again, as I say, we've got some interesting topics that we're going to dive into. So everything from the importance of personalized learning through to the opportunities that kind of lie ahead when industry and education are better aligned. We'll obviously be getting our speakers' thoughts on kind of what symbiosis in this area can do for student success and outcomes. And as I think Paul touched on a little bit earlier, at the end of today's session, we do have a chunk of time, should I say, that is dedicated towards specific Q&A. So as we're talking through various topics, please, I'd highly encourage you to ask any and all questions that come to mind, as I know certainly I can speak on behalf of Graham and Rui when I say we'd love to have the opportunity to discuss those in a bit more depth. So to kick things off, I think a great place to start is in the area of personalised learning, which I know is a term that's obviously frequently used, but is pretty broad in terms of its kind of possible meaning. I think personalised learning could be classed as anything from simple asynchronous delivery of a course right through to the dynamic creation of things like course content or assessment pathways. And in the context of, within reason, everything that we do online nowadays on a day-to-day basis being personalized to our online behaviors. So, the TV shows that we watch are recommended to us, the adverts around our media sources are targeted at our deepest desires, and, in some instances, even our music playlists are curated by algorithms. Orwellian anecdotes aside, the bar for personalization is ever being raised. So I'm interested to kick things off, essentially to look at, I guess, through what mechanisms or processes or technology both the institutions, kind of Graham and Rui, represent, how you've sort of looked to start adapt or I guess involve that standard or expectation. So Graham, kind of maybe you can touch on a little bit around your ideas on personalisation. How have you tried to address that at Cranfield?
Yeah, sure, Dan. I mean, look, let's get started on this straight away. This is a difficult topic to get into, really, particularly from an education front. As some of the examples you've mentioned there, they're miles ahead in terms of what they're capable of doing at the moment, led in no small part by the amount of data that they are collecting and able to use. I mean, we're not in that position. Certainly not at Cranfield, and obviously Rui can sort of say where Porto are, but certainly not at Cranfield. We just don't have that level of detail and data to be able to personalise to those kind of levels at the moment. And there are a lot of platforms out there that suggest that they are the Netflix of education, or that's what's coming. But I personally think we are quite a way away still from being able to achieve that, really. So it's coming. I do think that over the next 10 years, we're going to see a shift. I was at a webinar yesterday run by Professor Joe Nellis, who's a professor of economics at Cranfield. And he was talking about the next generation, and I think Generation Alpha he was talking about in terms of what their requirements are going to be, how their careers are going to, he thinks their careers will be much more focused on project type pathways. So rather than having long careers at organizations, they'll jump between these various different projects, and that will necessitate people having a much kind of greater involvement in choosing what they do next, how they pick the next role, but also what skills they need to do that. And I think we're beginning to see some of that request come through. I think in terms of, to perhaps try and answer your question a little bit about what we're currently doing, I think in some of our programs, we're particularly with the customization of our exec ed programs, we are working very closely with the clients that we have to understand what their specific needs are, and then to really try and customize and change our content so that it adapts and it is fit for the program and for the participants that come on those programs. It's a long way off kind of the types of customizations that you're talking about in terms of the music, but what we're aiming to do there is to actually understand what are the key buttons for the organizations that we work with. So Rui talked about the 40 odd clients that, or companies that they were founded off, and with Cranfield, I mean, I think typically we work with about 40 or 50 clients a year, roughly speaking, and our role would be to understand what it is that they need from us, and then to customize that and personalize that. But it's not a level of personalization that you kind of mentioned there. But what we typically find, before I hand over to Rui on this, we typically find is that from a participant's perspective, what they really like about the work that we do is that we're essentially understanding their problems. So it's about the challenges that they face rather than just a generic issue or talk around strategy or talk around leadership. We've understood and take the time to understand the issues and challenges that they as leaders face. And then we customize our programs to basically adapt to those challenges. That's not a technological approach, that's a human kind of consultative approach, I guess, that gets to that point. But I definitely think that in the next 10 years, we're going to see more of a drive down to that ability for me or you as an individual to be able to drive our own learning pathways.
Absolutely. I think it's an interesting perspective. And, as a technology provider, Graham, that's often where we find ourselves thinking, is this a technology challenge, or is there pedagogically, is there an element that needs to be addressed, and how do we support that? So Rui, what's the approach that you've kind of taken at Porto Business School? Is it a similar experience to Graham?
Yeah, we face similar issues, and of course we have come up in the past years more and more with the obvious solutions. So more and more the customization in our in-company executive education programs, more and more some personalization or the ability to provide more choices, for instance, in our MBA programs, the number of electives and the weight of the electives, for instance, in the overall program. Our digital MBA already provides for the 40%, almost 40% choice in the curriculum. So 40% of what I learn in the MBA, I will choose. Of course, I'm choosing out of the options that the school prescribed me. So it's still, as Graham was mentioning, it's still a long way from the deep personalization, tech-induced, data-driven. However, we have been addressing that, and we have asked ourselves a question that takes a little bit a step behind. It's not that people want to personalize. We think it's obvious. It's why and what is the purpose of what they want or need to learn. And very often they might not even understand that they will need to learn something. So again, bear in mind, we address adults, executives, post-grad, post-experience. So very often what our students are thinking about is their life design, their career design. So they have general purposes. They want to change career because they want to be happier. They want to progress in their career because they are ambitious and they want to be powerful. So there are so many motivations, and even inside the typical and obvious ones, change of the career, progression of the career, there are so many levels of purpose that more and more, I think, personalization is driven by purpose. So purpose-driven personalization. And this means understanding the real issues, the real goals of these people who are real people. They have colors of their eyes. They have different attitudes, different behaviors. Also, personalization from a prescription point of view, it's fairly easy. So it's easy for us to understand what are the skills of the future, what are the topics that are trendy. We can understand and assess what is the current status of the student and then prescribe. But not only it's about the personalization is about the skills or the knowledge or the behaviors that they are looking for or that they need. It's also about how they learn, because we all have a learning DNA and we all learn in different ways. And that is hard to understand, much harder to understand and much harder to understand individual by individual. So that's on that we are working on with tech and with data. We're trying to, we have an ongoing project that is really trying to collect all the data, all the possible data. When we speak with my team, I typically make this joke. I want to learn, I want to understand how if men aged 36 learn better on Fridays at 7:30 p.m. So you can even go in this direction. If we get this kind of information, we can understand how students learn and not only what are the best skills, what are the most important ones to fulfill their purposes, is how they learn, how they can be more efficient in the learning process. And this, it requires data, it requires analytics, it will most likely require AI, but definitely we need to have a humanized AI. So on top of this, we have the advisory, the lifelong learning advisor, the role that is almost like your lifelong learning psychoanalyst, you know, because it's a lot about the people's lives, people's ambitions. When people come to a business school to do an MBA or an executive education, they have to come after hours. They are spending time with us rather than with their family. So they are doing a sacrifice. We need to understand that. That has an impact. If we understand that, if we understand their learning DNA, their life goals, their career goals, we can really take personalization into a different level. I think we are still scratching the surface. I agree with Graham.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Dan,
sorry. Yeah, go, please.
Yeah, no, I was just going to follow up because Rui's spot on really there with everything he said. And, it's this issue of trying to understand how we personalize for people, is really important. And it's great. And I took a lot from what Rui was saying there about asking those questions with his team. I think that's something perhaps we should do more of, and we're not big on the data analytics side at the moment, but that's something I've got my eye on. But we have had a number of conversations with people that are doing different modes of study, so online MBAs, which we don't currently do, and some of the things that really interest us have been when we've spoken to people who've said, well, actually, I chose the path I've chosen to do it that way because actually it means I can sit on the sofa with my kids. And I would, without having that conversation with that person, I would never even have thought that that's a way to think about studying for an MBA. I mean, I did MBA in a very traditional way, and for me, that's kind of the model I had in my head. If you need that space and the time to study, but for this person, it was very important that they could still spend time with their family. So, as Rui said, asking those questions, finding those things out, and understanding what personalizes it for people. It might not just be about content and module descriptions of modules and what they might be about. It actually just might be about the way that people want to approach this kind of learning as well, and how long they might have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a fascinating insight. You're right. You automatically assume, and dare I say, in executive education, you almost default to the idea that this is a pragmatic approach to learning. I'm taking on this qualification in this way for this purpose, but you don't take into the, those social and emotional well-being themes or qualities as to the reason why you may be going through that mode of learning. So really, really interesting.
Do you mind that I build on top of this?
Please, absolutely. Go ahead, Rui, please.
To share an example that is really spot on with what Graham was mentioning. So during the pandemic, we launched the new MBA. So we decided to go crazy, and during a pandemic, let's just launch the most important program the school has. The Porto Business School was created to build an MBA. 33 years ago. So this is our flagship. Okay, this is the reason why we exist. So when adjusting to the pandemic and all things, we have been working on this. But so we decided to just go bananas and experiment with an MBA. Let's launch a new MBA. It's the digital MBA I mentioned, the one that already has 40% of optionals that allow for some personalization. But what we thought was exactly what Graham was saying. People not only want to do this because of their life and career goals, etc. They want to do this in their own way. So we thought about this idea of building an MBA, which was most likely overall one of the hardest programs in the world. Build an MBA that adjusts to people's lifestyle. So it builds on a range of possibilities. Let me give you an example. Normally, we prescribe that an MBA is a full-time MBA will be 1 year, an executive MBA might be a year and a half, 18 months, something like that. With the digital MBA, we created the possibility of running the MBA in 1 year. You can do that in 1 year, or up until 4 years, because every quarter you analyze the next quarter's schedule. You compare that with your life, with your career, with your work, with the workload you have, with your family's issues, and you just enroll what you need. So even personalization can even be on the schedule, the moments, because so we go on that, and I think so. Just to wrap it and underline, personalization really goes beyond not only choosing modules. Graham was spot on.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, as the masters of kind of personalization of an online experience, it's probably a pretty appropriate juncture from which to kind of move into our next topic, which is around this idea of collaboration across industry and education. And I remember when we were sort of looking at themes and ideas that we could talk to through this webinar, one of the things that stuck out to me was Google and Amazon's recent foray into the world of alternative skills-focused learning pathways. So for those who are unaware, back in May of this year, I believe it was, Google announced that in partnership with DWP, they would be launching their own certificates program, which is designed to provide a kind of low-cost route to obtaining in-demand workplace-focused skills. And that's kind of built off the back of the work that FutureLearn and Amazon Web Services announced back in June of the year prior, 2020, where they stated that they were launching their own industry-accredited micro-credential course aimed at helping those, I guess, looking to accelerate their career in cloud computing and fundamentally preparing them for an AWS certification. So whilst some would view that kind of foray into the learning world as perhaps a threat to the way kind of post-secondary and postgraduate education is currently delivered and the modes and methods available, obviously others can view that as a reason to innovate and forge better partnerships. And Rui, I think given the lineage of Porto Business School, you're probably well placed to talk to that. I mean, from your perspective, how does a kind of typical industry education relationship look like? Kind of how do you maintain those relationships? How do you improve them? What does that look like?
Yeah, this collaboration is really taking new approaches that are really interesting and fascinating. Let me add another example on top of yours, how EY and Hult built an MBA just for EY workers. And so you even start going into that direction, not only with the micro credentials like Google and so on. So I think we need to understand, and business schools, I think, that still feel that their competitors are other business schools are getting it all wrong. Our competitors are YouTube, before everything else, YouTube, TED and TED Talks, that gives you the idea that all knowledge can be compressed into 13 minutes talk. And this changes the perception of the good education. 13 minutes is enough. A little bit how Twitter changed the perception of what a text should be. It needs to be straight to the point. So, and I'm not criticizing, or I'm just stating, change of perception of the good education, lifelong education. And on the other hand, the notion that companies more and more want to target their education. A great competitor for business schools are the corporate academies, because they're bringing it internally. They're partnering up. I think it's obvious that we need to partner with them instead of just fighting them. It's just stupid. But there are multiple approaches. We have been addressing that, and we understand the power of the micro credentials, if you want. This is something fast. This is something actionable. This is something that translates into what on the traditional higher education they would call employability, and this has a powerful effect. If you translate this, and I'm now gonna bring a little bit our reality. So our reality is that we work side by side with companies in the qualification of their talent. So we can learn a little bit from those models and apply them under the context and the excellence that we all want and comply with all the accreditations from AMBA, from EQUIS, from EFMD, and so on and so on. Try to do that by combining both. Let me give you an example. We launched in February this year a thing called the Nanodegree, which is not new, not even the name was creative. Coursera had Nanodegrees for years. But the idea of the Nanodegree is exactly the notion that something around 24 hours or 48 or 76 or 90 something can really be a good format, a good length for executives to get workers, to get actionable skills. Okay. What we did was put a twist on it. So we sell this only B2B. So only companies can buy this, and actually they don't buy, they subscribe. So there's a subscription model, call it executive education as a service if you want. They subscribe to licenses that they can provide them to their talent, to their people, and the people come and use those licenses that have limited hours, 24, 48, and so on, and they choose, they pick and choose. I want to do a 4-hour course on this. They have this palette. Of course, some companies, and this is interesting to understand how companies are facing the notion and the idea of nurturing and qualifying their talent. Some companies are just giving this to the workers and say, you choose. If you want to learn, if you are in the marketing department, but you just want to learn international geoeconomics for fun, do it. We don't care. We want to provide you with the opportunity of working on yourself, the personal development. Other companies, on the other hand, use this and subscribe and say, we want a learning journey, and we help them to curate that learning journey because it's about marketing. It will be about marketing and so on. So, and this as a service, so monthly payment and so on. So we can learn, in my opinion, and by the way, technology like Canvas and allows us to really boost the outreach of this. We can really learn from those creative approaches that tech companies will, by the way, tech giants will become education giants if they aren't already. Think of LinkedIn and LinkedIn Learning. So instead of just fighting them or neglecting them as competition because we are high-level business schools and so on, we can learn from that. Make a twist, bring our brand, bring our value propositions, and really follow on what companies really need. And companies are, and I'll wrap it, on a war for talent. The shortage of talent means that they really are managing talent in a different way. So education becomes not only a company development tool, it is also faced as a personal development tool. I want my worker, my coworker, to be not only great at what he does, I want him or her to be happy. And happiness is about personal development, and education can also be part of that.
Absolutely, really, really fascinating. And I think, you make some great points there, Rui. I think it's so true around, YouTube, TED, this idea that complex concepts can be so easily condensed into these small bite-sized chunks. And again, as educational institutions, you're then held accountable to that standard, and how do you adapt to it? It's really interesting.
This is really going even crazier. I read this year that it was a provocative article. I think I don't know if it was in The Economist or it might have been somewhere else, sorry. Perhaps we can Google it, that the future of executive education is TikTok.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what the hell, right? We need to understand what they're doing and what we're saying. What they're saying is that the way TikTok works, by reinforcing dopamine in the kids' brains, we can learn something about that in terms of how we can keep students engaged.
Yes, absolutely. Graham, how about you? For you at Cranfield? I mean, obviously you've talked a lot about the relationships that you have with your clients. You spend a lot of time really understanding kind of the goals they're trying to achieve. So I'd imagine, even anecdotally, you've got some interesting kind of experiences of developing relationship with industry, and interested also to get your thought on kind of the threat, opportunity, or just BAU with a bigger brand, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, building on something Rui was talking about earlier, this idea almost of the learning consultant is something that we're quite big on really at Cranfield, and typically when we engage with a corporate client, one of our experienced team will work very closely with that client to understand what they're trying to achieve. And I mean, I can give you an example of where it was I witnessed it quite powerfully. This worked really powerfully was with a very global client that we worked with, had got a particular issue that they'd got between the senior leadership and the next level of management down, and there was a disconnect really in terms of what was happening between those two. And we spent quite a lot of time interviewing the senior execs at the kind of the highest level of the organization, really just chatting to them, finding out what was motivating them, what was driving them, what their concerns were. And then we did the same with the managers, and what we were finding was that there was just this real kind of expectation really that senior management was going to tell the next level of management what to do, but actually senior management wanted the people at the next level down to be empowered and take ownership, and they felt that message was being sent down the next level down. I mean, it's probably very typical of many organizations, but what we were able to do through kind of our process of working with them is really just highlight this discrepancy with the senior management. And what was nice was the senior management agreed to come and be part of the program. So we brought the most senior manager in, very down-to-earth person. He had a lovely office in London. We went to see him, and he made us a nice cup of tea himself when we got there. So you could tell the type of person he was. He was a really grounded individual, but he was more than happy to come and talk to this group of senior leaders and put it from his perspective. And in what was quite an emotional speech that he gave to these people, I think that really helped. We could have just said, yeah, we'll teach them some kind of theories and we'll tell them that they're empowered, but making that connection really, really did help them as an organization to move forward. So, our approach there is really to try and deeply embed ourselves. And I think some of the best programs that I've ever been involved with, the ones where I felt really connected to the client, almost like I'm a member of the client's organization, invest in time perhaps I shouldn't have done, but I decided it was worthwhile to do, going and spending time with the client and spending time in their organization and really understanding them. So, it's not really it's not an ideal to see. I guess it's a key account management role of sorts, but it goes beyond that really to really embedding yourself in there to understand what their key challenges are. I mean, I think we are seeing more L&D directors want people to take individual ownership for their learning. I think that's absolutely happening. And I've been into one organization where they have quite sophisticated piece of software that actually tracks what people are doing, what programs they're engaged with, what they might like to do in the future. And again, it kind of is that use of data, which is quite interesting there. But of course, it's only useful to this organization themselves. It's no use to us. We don't get to see it. We were just told that it existed and shown a snapshot of it. And then just to wrap up finally, I suppose, in this kind of area, I mean, I think Rui's again spot on with this kind of notion of TikTok and where we're heading, the kind of the snapshot of learning. So people want really quick kind of nuggets of information, I suppose, in a timely manner. We're working with one particular client where we have a whole system of these things set up, which are mapped really mapped against kind of the program. So they go through, I think it's about six sessions in a module. Each session in the module is on a specific topic, and then there's a series of content that's mapped against it that they can follow all of their way through. And they're only short snippets of information. They're not things that you're going to go into any great detail in, but it seems to help drive the program on, and people appreciate it. So it's quite interesting how that whole thing, the customization piece, but also the linkage between what we need to do as an organization maps across to what the organization wants from us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really interesting points. And we've had some good questions coming through as we've been talking. So again, encouragement to anyone else who, as we're talking, is getting some interesting thoughts or questions come up. We'll definitely make a note of those and continue to ask those to the panelists as we move through towards the end of the discussion. Just the final topic, moving on before we address that Q&A section, I think this idea, we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the idea of accessibility for everyone to this notion of continuous education. We've talked a lot about kind of MOOCs, micro and alternative credentials, and I think I saw a stat a couple of days ago that stated that learners, companies and governments now are currently spending at least, at best estimates, at least $10 billion a year on micro and alternative credentials, and the market for those accreditations is expected to double in the next 3 to 5 years. I think that the importance of continuous education being made available to all learners, some of the things that Rui and Graham have touched on earlier and throughout their careers, has never been more important. And again, in an environment where the rising cost of degrees and formal education is kind of outstripping current government and individuals' ability to pay, those kind of pathways and alternatives, substitutes, it's arisen over this sort of past 5 to 10 year period, alongside the speed of the change in those skill requirements. And certainly from my experience and the conversation that I've had with a number of institutions up and down the UK and Ireland, it's pretty interesting now to see how often we're asked about the ways in which Instructure's technology supports a kind of pick your own adventure style of learning, and at the bare minimum, an opportunity, I guess, for learners to sort of take command of their own route to an accreditation or a skill development. And on top of that, as a byproduct of institutions having to kind of completely virtualize their syllabus and curriculum, I think we're all learning now what is possible with respect to our kind of addressable, I guess, student population. So, pre-COVID, where we may have only thought that our kind of addressable students are local students in our country, or at least they're a large chunk of our cohort, with the advent, the normalization, and therefore improvement of online learning globally, all of a sudden, an institution can start to think about the ways in which they truly go out to the masses globally and start to diversify things. So, interesting, in that vein, kind of with that growing approach, this idea that now institutions have an opportunity to have this ongoing developing relationship with their alumni, continue to support them beyond the kind of traditional just post-secondary or postgraduate qualification. And certainly, from my perspective, coming back to the data that we've talked about, I think learning from how our alumni are going away with a qualification, coming back, perhaps taking a smaller micro style credential. Why did they want to come back? Should we have addressed that the first time around? This whole area and cycle of improvement is pretty interesting. I guess before we open to Q&A, one area I'm interested to find out from both of our panelists here is the idea of how industry communicates those skill shortages to educational institutions. So Graham, perhaps on this occasion, we'll start with you. From your experience, is it typically kind of a top-down approach in terms of those executives that you're liaising with? Are they the ones that are looking strategically at where they want their businesses to head, or are you looking at kind of a more bottom-up model where your actual students and the interest and the demand in the courses or accreditations you're offering is kind of driving where you need to spend your time in sort of R&D or the different areas there?
Yeah, I mean, good question, Dan. I think from my perspective, if I take it from that point of view, we're doing a bit of both of those things. So we'll be the same as every organisation. We'll get our a proposal request, which will give us a whole list of things that people believe that their organisation have a deficiency in or need upskilling in, or whatever the right word is here. And that will give us a sense, I guess, of some of the things that people are requesting or beginning to go through. But typically they tend to be quite broad. I mean, I think, usually we'll be told that, our people need to upskill in strategy development or leadership development. And it's not until we start unpicking below the surface that you start to get a better sense of what does that actually mean and how do we customize around it. So that's one way. I mean, with our existing clients, it's much more of a close relationship. So it's a more of an ongoing, a trusted advisor type relationship where, we will spot things, as I mentioned before, we'll spot those gaps where something's happening or where there's people responding to us or giving us, during the course of one of our programs, we would have a number of conversations with the participants as they are chatting over lunch or having a coffee, and that's actually quite a neat way of picking up a lot of the stuff that's kind of going on within the cohort or within the organization. And that's stuff that anonymously we can feed back into the organization as that trusted advisor. So that works really neatly. The other way that we're working at the moment, and this is partly because we're working with another part of Cranfield that's developing a undergraduate university proposition for Milton Keynes, so a project called MKU, which is essentially to try and build a new university in Milton Keynes around digital skills and the kind of the digital skills gap that exists. As part of that work, a number of us have been involved in going out to businesses, mainly local businesses, but some very big businesses as well, and really starting to kind of dig into, what are the graduate skills gaps that they see, what are the challenges and issues that they face year on year when those graduates leave university and come into their businesses. I mean, in some cases, you wouldn't really believe the stories that we've heard from people, things like, graduates joining and not really knowing how to answer the phone, for example. I mean, that kind of, anyone of my generation would stagger you to think, well, how can you not know how to answer the phone? But of course, everybody of the young generation has one of these things that when it rings, it tells them exactly who's on the other end of the phone. So when they pick it up, they know it's Graham or Rui or whoever. Whereas when they pick up the phone for the first time and the first day in the office, they don't know who's on the other end. So, there's a whole range of things, and it's different at different ends of the spectrum, clearly. So, what I'm talking about there is at the just graduated end, and that's a new project for Cranfield that we're working on, compared to the far end of the spectrum with the executive end. So, but we're trying to use both of those things to really give us a sense of perhaps where the market might need to move. So, to the point about micro credentials, what kind of subjects and areas might we want to think that Cranfield could make a difference in, and I think that's another key point for me is there is a lot of this stuff out there. There is a lot of content. There is a lot of capability for people to go and study things. You mentioned Google. It's my view that in the future, Google and Apple could be a massive threat to education, just because of the data they hold, the reach they have. If they want to turn on the Apple degree in something next week, if they've got the awarding powers somehow, it's quite a powerful proposition. But I think it's important for Cranfield organisations like Cranfield to really think about, well, what is it that we have got good expertise in, a good position in the market in, and where can we make a difference? Because that's kind of what we've always been about, really, rather than just trying to chase after everything that's possibly out there.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. And Rui, how about you? I mean, perhaps you could give some insights into the ways in which kind of Porto Business School is trying to, support learners of all ages, all experiences, locations. What are some of the things that you're trying to do to address that?
Yeah, so for 33 years now, we work with people from all ages, just after they graduate until people. I have students this year that are 50, 52, 53. And more you see that that range, the range of ages that we work with enlarging, because people are living until much later, thankfully, and they are aging better. There are other issues, but they are aging well. They are super active until later and later, and you still see people after their 50s changing their careers, and so the notion of lifelong learning is really something that I think that well, we believed in it 33 years ago, or our founders believed in it. I think it's trendy now and it's great. Okay, we know how to do it. We are lucky because of our model. Let me go back to our setup and our governance model, because every quarter we sit down in our supervisory board with 10 C-levels of companies that are in our board of administrators, together with professors from the University of Porto. So we hear from the leadership. So our main governance body actually is also one of our main sources of needs, issues, trends, drivers. So we hear it from the highest possible level. On the other hand, the permanent work that we do with the talent management staff inside our clients, inside companies, this is a relationship, a long-lasting relationship. Some of these companies are our founders and owners. By no means they need to do things with us. We are in the business like any other business school, so we compete. But of course, there's a long-lasting relationship, and this allows us for a better knowledge and truly a co-creation process that I think we have in place with companies. That said, some trends that we are identifying at the moment, everything digital and around, of course. There's this FOMO, fear of missing out. Everybody's trying to move to data literacy, digital transformation, X, Y, Z. Lots of mistakes being made, exactly because of the fear of missing out, exactly because tech companies, in Porto in particular, we have been very successful at attracting great knowledge centers from some of the largest tech companies in the world. But simultaneously, in the last 10 years, Portugal has 5 unicorns. So even our startups are now employing 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people. So the shortage of talent is forcing some legacy companies that are still absolutely important, that come from utilities, that come from retail, to move sometimes into not so clear directions with the idea of digital skills and so on. I think now that dust is settling down and people are understanding that more, and by the way, this is what we will be announcing. This is a preview of what we will be announcing next month in October in our annual event of presentation of the new things that we have. This notion that it's beyond upskilling and reskilling now, it's right skilling. That is the challenge. Upskilling and reskilling, it's easy to do. There will be lots of funding in the European Union, by the way, regarding that. But the right skilling and how to do the right skilling is important. So digital skills. And finally, a lot about the notion of mindset, changing mindsets, proactivity. You then could call it leadership program, leadership development program, or innovation program, or digital transformation program. But what really companies is trying to do is get their people to understand the power of adaptability. Liquid organizations, flexible organizations, fast organizations, they have to change very fast. So they need people that are able to be ambidextrous. And sometimes they even think they need superhumans, and they will not have superhumans. So we need to understand the potential and the limits of this ambidexterity, but at the same time, organizations are trying to become much more, I don't like to use the word agile, otherwise people start confusing with agile, the methodology. I prefer liquid. This kind of new organizational Darwinism. It's not the most powerful, neither the most fit. It's the one that better adapts. And companies understand that. So now there's a rush to adaptability by means of leadership or innovation or transformation. So two trends that we have been identifying, and the model of relationship is truly co-creation, is really being out there, learning from what we're delivering, understanding what's not right, and understand what happened. Measuring impact is something important. That typically a business school receives a student, we give a grade, we give a certificate. Financial Times measures impact on their careers for MBAs, for instance, or masters, but there are issues there. So how can we also measure that impact, and side by side with the companies?
Yeah, thank you, Rui. Some really interesting stuff that's been talked about. I'm very conscious of time and some of the questions that have been coming through. So I do just want to quickly wrap up. I think we've probably got time for 2 or 3 questions that have come in that I want to make sure that we put to both of our panelists. So Graham and Rui, I might have to try and rush you through some answers. You'll have to forgive me. One of the questions that's coming through the chat anonymously is, do you think that in a truly global education market, business schools' USPs have become more crucial? So in your opinion, what are the factors that differentiate business schools in the eyes of prospective students? Really interesting area to go into. So Graham, what are your thoughts around that idea of kind of USPs for a business school?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a really good and tricky question to answer. I think, generally speaking, one that our clients would ask of us as well is, what is your USP? I think if I take Cranfield for an example, I mean, Cranfield has, a relatively unique blend of schools at Cranfield that we can draw upon. We have our pretty unique in terms of we have our own airfield, for example, and therefore a school of engineering that sits alongside that. So, we can bring faculty and ideas and thoughts from those various different schools that we've got to bear across sort of the management programs that we run. I might not necessarily be answering the question. I think one of the things that perhaps we hear from our clients is the reason why they come to us rather than say go into a consultancy is trust. I think people see a university as a place they can trust. There's a lot of research that goes on at universities, a lot of deep thinking. There's not a lot of bringing people in and out quickly. It tends to be the same members of faculty that a business can work with year on year. So, we do hear a lot of our clients say that that they trust us more than they would trust some consultancies, for example. So yeah. Hopefully that goes some way to answering the USP.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. And very obviously keen to get your thoughts as well. I think certainly from our perspective in the conversations that I've been having, I think it comes down to a variety of things. And I think looking in the future, the thing that all institutions can own is the student experience, and how you absorb and embrace that as a service. Like you've said, Rui, right? We sometimes shy away from the idea of customers, but if we're being frank, that's what we're doing, is we're serving customers, and therefore customer experience has to be front and center. So, Graham, talking about the facilities you have and how those are blended into the way that students learn is critical. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on that, Rui, sort of USPs, how have they become more crucial, would you say?
Yeah. 3 or 4 thoughts very quick. First, business schools, they don't understand that they are being strongly disrupted. They don't understand anything. They are one step away from becoming just obsolete. Second, business schools that rely only on their academic excellency will fall short. Okay, take the first tier 1 business schools we all know about. They live on their brand, they have their reputation, they have everything, but all the others, which are the vast majority, academic excellence, even though absolutely fundamental, is not enough anymore. Okay. Third, the notion that business schools are missing out on a large part of their business, because typically we are only on the business of delivery of a solution. And if we go back to an individual or an organization process, there's lots of business, and by the way, good business that we are capable of delivering on the diagnosis, the prescription, and the delivery, and we can integrate that as a service. So there are transformations in the business model. Of course, at Porto Business School, we rely on this idea. We were born from companies, with the university, for companies, even though that's not enough. So we need to take this extra step.
Thanks, Rui, and apologise that I'm rushing you both. I think we'll try to squeeze at least 1 or 2 more questions in. One that's quite a general question that's come in. How do Graham and Rui see the business education landscape evolving over the next 10 years. So no mean feat to answer that question to you both, to predict the future. But an interesting, I think it's actually probably a good way to summarize some of the things we've talked about. So Rui, perhaps you can lead us off on this occasion. How do you sort of see the business education landscape evolving? Because it kind of leads in or leads on from what you were just saying, right?
Yeah, 10 seconds. I think we need to be prepared. Most likely what will happen to business school education. So I'm thinking about executive education, the things we do, not higher education. I think it will happen something similar to what has happened to the music industry in the past 20 years. Lots of disruption, lots of big changes that we are still not able to anticipate. We can't anticipate the power of what Apple and Google and Amazon will do, or Microsoft will do. We can't anticipate what the technology will allow. There are multiple opportunities, but I think we need to be what we prescribe to our clients: fast, agile, liquid, prepared.
Very nice. Thank you. That's a mean act to follow, Graham.
Well, I was going to say, I'm not sure I can really follow it much, to be honest. But I mean, again, Rui is absolutely right. We have got to evolve very quickly as organisations. I mean, we've got to be faster at that. We've got to think about, that customer experience, customer expectation. What do they want from us? What do they need from us? And what are they going to want? I mean, I think, just to give you a few examples of things that I think I can see, or we are seeing change prior to the pandemic, is we're definitely seeing companies start to ask for more hybrid delivery. For example, they don't want to fly people around the world anymore as much as they did previously, and that, will that be a short-term thing? I'm not sure. I think once people realize how much money they can save, that will just be something that they continue to do. So I think we have to be ready for that, and that is a challenge in its own right, because we don't just need to have to be technologically ready. We have to have faculty readiness to deliver in this space as well, because it's not the same. I mean, one very brief example of a member of faculty I spoke to recently, he had adapted really well to online delivery, but he said about how difficult and how different online delivery was to his delivery in the classroom. He was absolutely fantastic in both spaces, absolutely brilliant. He went back into the classroom in a socially distanced way, and he said, wow, that was like having to relearn it all again, because he's used to being able to interact with people in front of him, but actually then they were spaced out. So when we asked him then to do some hybrid stuff, we're asking him to do it all over again. And so there's a big challenge there, I think, for all of us to be able to keep up with that kind of level of demand from clients. But it is coming for certain.
Graham, we adopted hybrid by default forever in our programs, and the challenge is not technological. There are solutions. Instructure can provide us great solutions. We built a virtual campus last year together with you guys, but the challenge is pedagogical. The challenge is adaptation. It has been so hard for our professors that are heroes. And by the way, many of our professors are not professors, are executives that come from industry and teach. So their pedagogical background is, I would say, lighter than a full professor. So the challenge is huge, and we have heroes, and both our staff, our faculty, they are heroes because they are trying to adapt, and this is great. That's having the willingness is the first step.
Yeah, spot on.
Absolutely. Well, look, I'm so sorry that we haven't had a chance to get round to everyone's questions, but there's been at least 2 or 3 that have come through, and that I can assure you we will come back to you on after this session has finished. Both Graham, Rui, and myself, we can add some comments and responses to some of the other questions that have come through this afternoon. But before, Paul, I hand over to you to wrap up, I want to firstly thank our panelists, Graham and Rui, for spending the time to talk through some of the topics. I'm sure I can speak on behalf of everyone that's attended today to say that, we're very lucky to have both of you on the call and talk through your perspectives. I know I've certainly gained a lot of insight and learned a lot from the ways in which you're kind of conducting yourself. So thank you for your time. And also, thank you for everyone that's attended on the webinar today. It's been great to have everyone around. The engagement's been fantastic. The questions that have come through have been superb. So thank you all for your time. And Paul, I'll hand over to you for any closing comments.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. Obviously, I'd just like to reiterate what you've said. Thanks to yourself, Graham and Rui, for a fantastic and inspiring session today. Also to Ola for your support throughout. That's been amazing. Like you said, unfortunately, we ran out of time. I think we could have gone on for a lot longer. Obviously, a lot of questions coming in and a lot of great answers, and obviously the conversation was going in a really good way. So obviously, thank you again. Just before we do close, just to remind everyone that if you do have any questions, drop them in, and then we'll get passed on to Dan, Rui, and Graham to follow up. And also just to remind everyone that today's session was recorded, and obviously the recording will be sent to you guys a week from today, so you'll receive an email with the exclusive link. So what's all left to say is thank you again, Dan, Graham, Rui, and Ola, and of course to Canvas and Structure for putting on this webinar. And we look forward to seeing everyone at the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.